I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We have a great episode for you today, and today's episode is brought to you by Rocklink, but more on them a little later. So we're going to talk about the Nova Scotia forest ban. We're going to talk about the insane, preemptive, soft authoritarianism and government overreach. That is the theme of today's show. But first, I want to report about a little victory here at Juno News. So it's not a victory for us as a company. We do have plenty of those, but this is a victory, a small triumph for all Canadians, and a testament to the value of independent media and the cause of freedom in Canada, not just Juno News, but other independent outlets like the Rebel Media. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, we reported on a CBC smear campaign against a Christian singer and prayer leader named Shawn Feucht. The CBC teamed up with a Liberal MP to smear him, to demonize him, and to pretend that somehow he was a threat to our country. Now, as I mentioned on the show, the CBC wrote dozens of articles. I'm not exaggerating, folks. They wrote dozens of articles smearing him, labeling him MAGA. You can check. MAGA appears in almost every headline that the CBC wrote about Shawn Feucht. They're trying to scare you. They're trying to scare people into thinking that he's some kind of a political activist, that he's here promoting Donald Trump, or that he's trying to push a MAGA agenda onto Canada. But that is not true. Shawn Feucht is a Christian singer and prayer leader. He tours Canada every single summer, and he's simply trying to inspire Canadians and connect Canadians with God. Now, that shouldn't be controversial in a Christian country like Canada. Canada is still a majority Christian country, and our country was founded on Christian morals and Christian ideals. But to the CBC, that is something to be scared of, and so they successfully disrupted many of Shawn Feucht's appearances and services in Eastern Canada and Central Canada. Folks, that is the power of propaganda that the CBC has to capture audiences in that part of the country. But things are a little bit different out west. And Shawn Feucht has been given the green light for a concert service in Edmonton, thanks to the UCP government and Premier Danielle Smith. I'm going to read a little bit from this Juno News article written by Cosmin Georgia, breaking Alberta government defies anti-Christian censors and permits Shawn Feucht concert. The government has greenlit a major worship event featuring American Christian rock musician Shawn Feucht on the Legislative Assembly on Alberta grounds in Edmonton. And so we've, like we said, we mentioned this a lot, and we were worried that Shawn Feucht was going to Alberta and that the government was going to cave to the same forces and the same hysteria led again by CBC and liberal activism, but good for the UCP, good for Albertans for standing up for freedom of religion and freedom of speech in Canada. You should not censor someone just because you don't like them. Shawn Feucht is allowed to do this kind of thing. Canada is a free country after all, and Canadians still have the right to their access of prayer services and religious worship. So again, that is a small victory for all Canadians. Okay, let's talk about these insane forest bans that are happening in our country. Folks, this is scary authoritarian stuff. So you probably saw the news last week that Nova Scotia has banned hiking in private woods. You are not allowed to go into the woods in Nova Scotia right now upon fear of a $25,000 fine. So I'm going to read a little bit from the Juno News report on this. Nova Scotians have been ordered to stay out of the woods in the forest. Folks, 75% of the province is made up of forest, but you cannot go into the forest or you face a $25,000 fine. Simply stepping into the woods, even on private land, is now banned by the provincial government with similar penalties to breaching a fire ban. The announcement came from Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston, concerned activities deemed not necessary, including hiking, camping, fishing, off-road vehicles during this dry spell with conditions that could spark a potential wildfire. So this is the announcement made by Premier Tim Houston of Nova Scotia. Remember, this guy's a conservative. And during the recent federal election, he was openly campaigning for himself instead of supporting Pierre Poilievre, who was the conservative leader running in the election. This guy has serious leadership ambitions, even meaning undermining the leader of his own party, at least in name. He's supposed to be a conservative. He's supposed to be on Team Conservative. He didn't do that during the campaign. And now he's out there telling everybody to get inside and that it's not necessary for you to go hiking or camping or fishing in a Canadian summer. Let's play that clip.
We're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods. We are restricting travel and activities that really aren't necessary for most of us. Hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits. Camping is allowed, but only in official campgrounds. The fine for violating any of these bans is the same as the fine for the ban on burning, $25,000.
Folks, that is insane, okay? We are Canadians. It is our birthright. It is our God-given birthright that we have certain inalienable freedoms. We are allowed to move. We have freedom of movement in Canada. It's guaranteed in our charter. And besides the charter, it is just a basic right that you could go outside. You can go into the forest. You can go into your yard. You can enjoy nature. We only have a few short months to enjoy the sunshine and the warmth in Canada. And for a premier to preemptively say that you can't go outside, this ban, by the way, folks, goes into mid-October. We're talking about weeks upon weeks, months upon months of not being able to go outside just in case there may be a fire. I mean, to my ears, this is pure authoritarianism. It is unbelievable for a conservative premier to tell you that it's not necessary for you to go outside. Nova Scotia's Department of Natural Resources wrote this on X. If you see something that looks like a violation of the burn ban or wood restrictions, please report it to us by calling this number. Please remember that some people will have travel permits to go into the woods primarily for work. Look, I totally understand a burn ban. I understand that there are concerns of forest fires and that you shouldn't be able to set fires and have bonfires and all those kind of things. That makes perfect sense, okay? Even an ATV ban, because there could be a spark, there could be a motor. I hear and I understand it's quite dry in Nova Scotia right now, but the idea that you can't even go for a walk in nature in Canada is patently absurd, and people should be up in arms about it. And yet, instead, what we hear, even from the conservative side, is a lot of people making excuses and saying, actually, it is correct for the government to ban all people from going outside. And so here I'm talking about former conservative strategist turned CBC pundit, Fred Delorre. I believe he used to be head of the Conservative Party. This is what he wrote on X. As a woodlot owner in Nova Scotia, I can tell you firsthand, the forest floor is like tinder right now. You can feel the heat rising from it, just waiting for a spark. Our province's small communities are tightly woven into the woods. One fire doesn't just burn trees, it can burn roads, wipe out homes, and trap people fast. We don't have a buffer zone or fire breaks that larger provinces do. A short-term ban on recreational access is inconvenient for sure. It's also smart. One careless step could cost millions and devastate lives. I understand that argument. I do understand that there is concern, which is why you need proper forest management. The forests need to be swept. They need to be properly cared for. And I would even understand if the government said, look, this one area is problematic, and so don't go over here. But a blanket ban across an entire province just in case is patently absurd. Okay, next we have Globe and Mail contributor Stephen Mayer. He criticized National Post journalists and many others on social media for even questioning the forest ban. How dare you question this wise authoritarian move, says Steve Maher. He says, don't listen to these people. Stay out of the woods. They smell like they're about to burst into flames. That is what he said in response to journalist Michael Taube, who just basically said that this is all very excessive, which of course it is. Stephen Maher had a lot more to say about it. I'm going to read a little bit from his Twitter thread. He says, because the Nova Scotia government has closed the woods, I went for a run by the side of the road, instead along a trail I usually use. It's dumb, obviously, since I would not start a fire by running on a trail, but c'est la vie. So he admits the absurdity of it. He says then, the woods are dry, are tinder dry. I think the province is right to have ordered the woods closed. You can't just ban unsafe activities. You have to ban it all. You have to ban it all, folks. That's the mentality. Just ban it all, right? Most people won't be out there doing irresponsible things like smoking in the woods or starting campfires. They know that it is dangerous, and most people have common sense. But instead of trusting people, instead of saying, follow these guidelines, follow these rules, no, we have to resort to a blanket rule and then a blanket ban, and then you have useful idiots like these saying you have to ban it all. It's just responsible. Stephen Maher goes on to say there's a lively debate on this website, talking about X, with libertarian-minded people from points west blaming Tim Houston for overreach, but I suspect Nova Scotians support the measure. Nova Scotians locked down hard and early during the pandemic. As a result, we had lower mortality. It looks like the death rate was actually lower than normal. And he wrote, some people are having emotional reactions to the Nova Scotia forestry policy. Yeah, because in a free society like Canada, you shouldn't just be able to lock it all down. And he even mentions that during COVID, they were somewhat successful because they locked it all down. Well, you know what? Sweden did the exact opposite thing, and they also had lower mortality rates. So explain that one, Steve Maher. But that is the problem. It's normalized. We've normalized this idea that the government can just order everybody to stay inside and say no to the forest. And it isn't just just Nova Scotia, folks. New Brunswick has followed suit. So on Saturday afternoon, we got the announcement from Nova Scotia Premier that they will also join Nova Scotia with their own forest ban, and basically just making kind of the same argument, except for, listen to this, folks, because speaking at a press conference, New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt said that the hiking ban isn't actually about preventing fires in New Brunswick, but preventing possible injuries. Play that clip.
Me going for a walk in the woods is going to cause a fire. I can understand why people think that that's ridiculous. But the reality is, it's not that you might cause a fire. It's that if you're out there walking in the woods and you break your leg, we're not going to come and get you, because we have emergency responders that are out focused on a fire that is threatening the lives of New Brunswickers. And if you take your boat out fishing in a pond in Crown Land and you capsize, we're not going to be able to come and help you out, because our first responders are focused on an immediate and serious threat to our province.
Wait a second. So it's not even that they don't trust you not to start a fire, but that they can't get to you to save you because they're so busy. So now, folks, we have politicians justifying lockdowns because they're overworked. They're overworked and underfunded. And so they just can't help you if you get hurt. And therefore, you're just not allowed outside. You're just not allowed outside in Canada because you might get hurt and our first responders might be busy. This is totally insane, okay? This is totally insane, and Canadians deserve to be mocked rightly. I want to point to a social media post by Shopify CEO Toby Lutke mocking government overreach. This is absolutely right. He writes, "True North, strong and free with a little Canadian maple leaf. Little asterisk there, except you're not allowed to go in the woods." That is absolutely right, okay? It is so absurd that we have this entire elbows up movement that people on the political left, liberals, CBC crowd, love to talk about waving the Canadian flag, love to talk about elbows up, love to champion the Charter of Rights and Freedom, except for then they can also sit there and ban you from going in the woods, not because you could start a fire in a very dry season, but because you could fall and get hurt, and that you might have to wait a long time to get help, or heaven forbid, you might have to get help from someone in your own community. You might have to make a phone call and get someone in your family or someone else to help you. But no, we're just going to ban everybody from going in the woods. CTV contributor Sharon Khan mocked Toby Lutke of Shopify for opposing the forest ban. This is what she wrote on X. "Being Canadian isn't about whining that you can't stroll in the woods during a fire ban. It's about knowing when to shut it down for the greater good. The real danger is leaders like Toby who worship freedom at all costs, even if it means watching the province burn." Wow, quite the hyperbole there. Is the province burning? Is the province burning? Quick question. Well, look at this. We have a map of Nova Scotia so that viewers can see the actual forest fires that are happening in the province. And there are currently 2 active forest fires. There are 2 small and contained forest fires, as you can see. So no, the whole province isn't up in flames. No, there aren't massive wildfire raging across the province right now, just like what we saw in France earlier this summer, what we've seen in California or Hawaii over recent years, devastating fires. And yes, in large part that was because they didn't evacuate fast enough. We're not talking about evacuating from a live fire here, right? We're talking about banning people from staying inside lest they start a fire, or even lest they get hurt and we can't get to them on time. So just totally over the top from the legacy media and social media commentators. I have one more, Laura Babcock, who is just like your traditional, typical CBC lib, Trudeau Anon type on X. This is what she writes. "People who are complaining that they can't go into the woods during fire season remind me of the same people who were complaining they couldn't go to parties during the pandemic. Selfish and small-minded, they never care about the greater good." The greater good, folks. No, you can't enjoy your life. No, you can't live in freedom, even though it's your birthright in Canada, because we've just decided that for the greater good, you just can't do that anymore. We're just going to take away your rights for the greater good, and you go along with it. And if you don't, we will ridicule you and call you out. And yes, we have already had our first fine handed out from the Nova Scotia government. So this isn't just a scare tactic. They're actually out there handing out these fines. A veteran has been fined $28,000 for the crime of walking in the woods in Canada. In a video shared on X, retired Canadian veteran Jeff Evely walked into the woods in open defiance of Nova Scotia's ban moments before being fined nearly $29,000 by provincial environmental officers. There are environmental officers out there patrolling the forests, monitoring them, making sure you don't go outside. And if you do, you will get punished with the full extent of a fine handed out by the feds, by the province. This is a longer clip, but I'm going to play it 65 seconds so that you can see the absolute ridiculousness of this all. Let's play that clip.
This is the DNR office on Mountain Road in Coxheath, Nova Scotia, and this is not the woods. But back here, this is the woods. So I have a couple of conservation officers with me right now who are not on camera but have advised me that if I go into the woods, if I defy their orders to go into the woods, then I will be fined, and they also said that they would double my fine to $50,000. I don't know that there's a good spot to do this, but I'm just going to make this as painless as I can for those guys and go in here. And they have me on camera.
Fine is $28,872.50.
Okay. I thought it was $25,000. It's $28,870.
With court costs, victim fees, taxes.
Oh, victim fees.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I have a ticket here for, let me see if we can see that, $28,870.50 for victimizing somebody.
So in a country where thieves break into homes, break into cars, where you have heinous crimes happening almost every day, judges giving shortened sentences for immigrants so lest they don't get deported, here we have a veteran in defiance of the law, doing it intentionally just to basically see if they're being sincere with these fines. Yes, they are. Not only do you have to pay the $25,000 fine, you also have to pay taxes on that fine and something called a victim fee, which I have no idea what that is about. But this is absurd, folks. And I'm proud to report, happy to report that the Canadian Centre for Constitutional Freedoms will be working with Jeff Evely to challenge this forest ban, as they should. Okay, I want to share some of my thoughts as to why I think that this is such a big deal. So as usual, as typical, the CBC Lib crowd are intentionally misreading the negative reaction, right? They're pretending that people who are criticizing this are just libertarians, they're Westerners, they don't understand Nova Scotia, they don't understand the threat that is happening, maybe they don't understand the collectivism of a place like Nova Scotia, and really this is just about the government acting in the greater good. Now, let me just tell you, if this was actually the government acting in the greater good, if there was a clear and imminent danger, an evacuation order would be necessary, it would be reasonable, and no one would be questioning it, right? If folks from Los Angeles or Maui or even the town of Jasper had been evacuated, people wouldn't question that, right? For their safety, that is what the greater good is for. That is what a responsible government would do. If there's imminent danger, evacuate. Nobody would question that. In fact, they would applaud it. It happens all the time during floods, during hurricanes, and other natural disasters, including forest fires. But what we oppose is governments ordering people to stop healthy outdoor activities just in case, and a permanent ban, an indefinite ban until the end of summer, until it starts snowing, basically. A government saying that you can just shelter in place. We now have that power to force you inside. During the dark ages of COVID, the government created this power. Well, they didn't actually create it. They borrowed it from communist China. This is a power that the communists use in places like China. They can just ban you from going outside and order you to shelter in place, and folks have no choice but to go along with that. But that is not a welcome public policy development in a free and democratic society. Governments should not have this power. Now, let me just tell you, folks, we should have fought harder against these restrictions during COVID. Yes, in the very early days, we were all concerned. We didn't know what was going to happen. And so maybe we could be forgiven for going along with it for the first 2 weeks. Remember that 2 weeks to flatten the curve? But the extended overly used orders to stay inside, to remain indoors, to shelter in place, to work from home, et cetera, should have never been allowed in the first place. Thankfully, we finally did have an uprising against it. It was called the Trucker Convoy, and we all know how that ended with the government propaganda units and former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau absolutely inexplicably demonizing these people in horrendous ways. Don't get me started on that. But we should have not allowed it to do it, because now Governments have that as part of their arsenal. It's just another tool in the toolkit. We can just order people to shelter in place, order everyone to stay inside, say no forest, you're going to ban you $25,000 for going into the forest. Folks, this is the road to serfdom. We are on the road to serfdom. We are well along this road, and that is why this needs to stop. Do not allow them to normalize this. Fight back with every ounce that you can. Good for that individual for defying the rule. Hopefully that forest ban will get overturned. You won't actually have to pay that fine. But if you don't, if we just go along with it, like the CBC journalists and the Globe and Mail journalists are all telling you that you have to, every year during the summer, rather than clearing out the forest and having responsible forest management, rather than just being concerned with specific areas that could be at risk, the governments will use this every time they can. They will just say, you know what, time to shelter in place. Forest fire season's coming. We don't want anyone to get hurt. Everyone just be good little people and go into your house, go along with what we are saying. And we cannot allow that. That is not something that we should go along with, which again is why we need to fight back against this. All right, folks, I am very pleased today now to be joined by Jonathan Wellham. He is the president and CEO of Rocklink Investment Partners. Rocklink is an independent investment managing firm focused on creating portfolios of high-quality assets. It's based out of Burlington, Ontario. They're the proud sponsor of Juno News. Jonathan has years of investment and financial experience, and he is joining our show today to provide viewers with helpful financial advice and to provide analysis on Canada's current fiscal outlook. For more information about Rocklink and their services, please visit rocklink.com. That's ROCKLINC.com. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining the Candice Malcolm Show. How are you?
I'm doing very well, enjoying a lovely summer here in Toronto, and the stock market's been pretty good too, so no complaints when you're in the investment industry.
Well, there you go. And in Ontario, we're still allowed to go in the forest. We're still allowed outside, unlike our brothers and sisters out east. You had an op-ed here at Juno News called "The Moral Decline, the Path to Currency Collapse in Canada." So why don't you walk us through that?
Well, one of the things that we've been observing the last couple of years, of course, is the high price of gold, silver, some of the commodities going up. And I was quite intrigued by a lot of articles that I was reading that suggested that when the currency starts to weaken, that's when it leads to moral problems and moral issues, social issues, and so forth. And I thought, well, this is actually very untrue. I mean, yes, as currency weakens, it's going to lead to further problems. But why do we experience currency declines in the first place? And so you go back and, of course, you look at history. I started in that op-ed even going back to the Old Testament, back to the prophet Isaiah, speaking about the corruption in the societies back then. And one of the indications that a society is quite evil and corrupt is it dilutes its currency. It waters it down. And back then, of course, they had silver coins, and so they would water it down with dross or non-silver metals. And so when you look at our own situation in Canada, I think people don't fully realize, we're starting to see some of the impact in our economy and the standards of living which have collapsed for our young people over the last couple of decades. But they don't realize how much our currency has lost value over the last 54 years. And so if you go back to what I did in the articles, I went back to 1971 when Richard Nixon, President of the United States, took the U.S. off of the final remnants of a gold standard. Gold was $35. Today it's $3,300, $3,400, so it's up 95 times. And then if you look at the debt, of the United States, similar to Canada, the debt level has increased by 92 times. And then the money supply is up by about 82 times. And so what you've seen here is you've seen largesse, governments getting larger and larger, promising more and more, taxes going up, regulations going up. You've seen deficits increase, accumulated debts go right off the charts. And what happens eventually is you crowd out private money, you crowd out productivity, you start to become a redistribution economy, and you don't make things anymore, and you don't produce things anymore, and you don't dig holes and develop your resources like we're seeing in Canada. And what happens? You lose purchasing power and wealth levels start to decline. And so that was really the purpose of the article, that what's led to that? Lack of hard work, virtue, standards, breakdown in the homes and the families in our country, and so forth. And so you've had a lot of moral and ethical issues which have gotten us to the place where we're at now. And so our issue is, if we're going to fix these things, we have to acknowledge the foundation has been really broken. And when you look at your currency and you look at the loss of your purchasing power, that's one of the best indications that something has really gone wrong in your country.
Well, it really is a stealth tax on the middle class and on people who save, and it's punishing people who save. Your article does a great job of going through the history of it. And to someone like me, Jonathan, it's so frustrating because it seems to me that every time governments do this and print massive amounts of money, the same thing happens. We deal with sky-high inflation, right? You drown out the money supply. And so, you walk us through. It happened in the Roman Empire. It happened in the French Revolution. It happened in, obviously, Zimbabwe and places like Argentina. And yet, post-COVID, I could have told you that this was going to happen. They told us it was something new called modern monetary theory, and that all you had to do was just print money, and it was like magic. That wasn't going to happen. And then we all went through inflation. Then they try to gaslight us and say, oh no, the inflation had nothing to do with our spending. It was transitory, or it was just because of supply chains, and it was because of COVID. No, it wasn't. It was because of the printing of money. And I feel like we're similarly being gaslit, because every problem in Canada, it's easy. There's a scapegoat. They just blame it on President Trump and say this is all because of the tariffs. There's a report last week that Canada lost over 40,000 jobs, which is the most since the pandemic. Jobs lost, 40,000 positions in July. That's pretty scary. And yet the Liberals and the media, the CBC, kind of just shrug it off and pretend that it's about President Trump. But it isn't, right? The Canadian economy is in trouble independent of what's happening to our neighbors.
Absolutely. These trends have been in place now for 10 years plus. And I'd argue even some of these trends had started going back a couple of decades. They certainly were exacerbated and made much worse from the days when Justin Trudeau took over, and the Liberal policies, which are basically socialist left-wing policies. And so if you crowd out the private sector and you don't make things and produce and you grow your economy, then of course prices are going to go up if you flood more currency into the system. It's impossible not to. And when you look at President Milei down in Argentina, what he's doing is trying to reverse everything that we're actually doing. What is Trump doing in the United States right now? He's unleashing capital. He's lowering the cost of capital. Money's coming into the country. You get productive businesses to expand. And that's the way you're going to deal with inflation. We're doing the exact opposite, so it shouldn't surprise us. Our standard of living in Canada cannot increase. It has to go down if we continue on the policies in which we are, the road that we've been on now for the last 10 years plus, and Prime Minister Carney is not making any changes. His ideology is the same as we've seen the last 10 years, and you can see him basically slow walking everything. And what we need to do is unleash capital, get capital back in this country, start to develop the oil sands, further pipelines, develop our uranium more, all of our resources, the developments of our energy, lower our cost of energy, get off these crazy EV mandates, let the market determine where our energy should be developed. That's what will lower inflation and drive up our wealth. And we're starting to see what's happening in the U.S., and it's going to be a major contrast between Canada and the United States because of policies, not because of tariffs. I mean, tariffs can make things a little bit more, put a little more pressure on us, but that is not the underlying reason at all.
Well, so it feels like a bit of a contradiction then that the stock market is doing so well. You mentioned on the top, the stock market is doing quite well. I noticed last week that the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange, hit an all-time high. I think that was in large part because of Shopify. Shopify has become the number one stock, the highest valued company in Canada. Full disclosure to the audience, my husband is an executive at that company. And so I'm obviously cheering on Shopify. I think it's a great success story for Canadians. It's a company that enables small businesses to move their business online and helps people connect with customers. It's a great Canadian success story. So walk us through a little bit about the stock market, why it's doing so well, and how it can do so well even when we are governed in a way that's been sort of driving middle class prosperity down, making the cost of living so expensive, and just making it really unaffordable for young Canadians.
Yeah, one must remember that the TSX, or the Toronto stock market, which you're referring to, still has very large corporations, and many of these companies have expansive operations south of the border and around the world, and so they are actually profiting from some of the developments in the United States and some of the opportunities down there. We also have a large materials or commodities sector. And that also has been going up quite a bit because people are concerned about the drop of their currency values. Going back to the currency issue again, if fiat currency is going down in value, then commodities typically will go up to protect you in value. So gold has been going up, some of the precious metals. Canada's got some great companies in that space. And so those companies have been doing well. But I think if you look at even some of our big infrastructure companies, the Brookfield companies, which have been really topical, of course, because of Bart Carney, they're doing very well. But I mean, they're expanding all around the world, but they trade on the Toronto stock market. So I think it's the smaller businesses, the really Canadian-centric companies that are under more pressure. They're under the radar screen and not necessarily reflected within the TSX itself. But boy, if we had proper governance and policy out of Ottawa and across most of our provincial governments, because we have very poor leadership at the provincial level too in many of our provinces. Speaking from Ontario, I'm horrified with Doug Ford's policies as a business person. And if we had better policies, we would unleash amazing growth in this country. The wealth in this country is almost unprecedented around the world, but you have to develop it, and you have to want to develop it, and you have to bring the capital in, and you have to lower the costs. So we would have a much higher TSX if we had proper policies.
Well, I think that Argentina's President Milei is providing a great example of what policy changes and free markets can do. This is Jonathan Wellham, who is the president and CEO of Rocklink. Rocklink is a proud sponsor of Juno News. So, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about your business and how people can work with you.
Yeah, we're a wealth management company. We work with families directly. We're registered right across the country. We are disciplined long-term investors, so we try to think outside the box. We just don't follow the indexes. We buy a handful of great companies that are well researched by a very strong group of research professionals here at Rocklink. And we buy and we try to invest for the long term. So we try to think 3 to 5 years out. So we're not driven by ESG, DEI, all of the little acronyms out there. We go back to basics. We look for great companies run by the very best people, and we can buy them at good valuation. So absolutely, give us a call. We'd love to talk to you and give you a free analysis and assessment of your financial position.
All right, folks, you can find out more at rocklink.com. That's ROCKLINC.com. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining the show, and thank you for sponsoring Juno News and this episode.
Thank you very much, Candice. Love the program and the work that you're doing.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.